Hello, this is Dave Sugarbaker, and today is the 25th day of August 2024. And I'm back from my two churches, and I have a reading from Revelation. This is from the end of the book of Revelation, and I'm going to talk about the book after a bit. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them as their God, and they will be his people. And God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away." I had the TV on the other night. It was later than usual. And I was sort of watching a PBS program on nature. This was a program on wolves, and it was a program that featured zoologists who were studying wolves in some relatively developed part of the world, but not the United States. And the scientists were studying the importance of the pack. And as they observed the wolves, the pack happened to stray onto a farmer's territory, and one of the wolves was shot by the farmer. Not killed, but shot. The wound would become fatal, however, if it wasn't treated. Now, the problem was that this group studying the wolves had treated individual wolves in the past when they had been wounded in one way or another, and every previous wolf patient had died. And the autopsies showed that the wounded wolves, separated from the pack for treatment, had died of the broken heart syndrome. And suddenly the television program had my full attention. What? They're talking about the broken heart syndrome with wolves? When I was a bereavement facilitator at hospice, we talked about the broken heart syndrome. We understood that grief was real and could be debilitating. Grief is exhausting, like digging a ditch all day. And the broken heart syndrome was a factor to consider in dealing with grief and bereavement. In a small percentage of cases, sometimes, but not always, the death of a longtime spouse was followed soon by the death of the other partner. We hospice people knew that the broken heart syndrome was real, but I didn't realize that it was an identifiable medical fact. I'm not clear what the wolf autopsies found, but it concerned problems of the left ventricle of the heart. That was the broken heart syndrome. Nevertheless, the zoologist had a problem, and that was if they separated the injured wolf from the pack, there was the risk that it would fail to thrive in spite of the best efforts to heal the gunshot wound. And so the scientists came up with an ingenious solution to address the broken heart syndrome. They captured the wounded wolf and sent it to the wolf hospital to be attended to. And they also simultaneously kidnapped several other wolves from the pack. And after surgery, the wounded wolf therefore had several pack members to keep it company as it healed. The intervention was successful, and the wolf patient healed nicely with its buddies to keep it company. And all of the wolves were then returned to the wild to rejoin the larger pack. I learned something important as I have thought about the interrelatedness of medical science and our emotional social life. Success is not either or, it's both and. Our emotional life enhances and strengthens our physical life, our physical health, or conversely, it can cause us to wither. Our emotional life is that important. Also, it's amazing to me to understand that the broken heart syndrome is not limited to us human beings. Animals grieve as well. Within the last century, scientists have discovered another syndrome similar to the broken heart syndrome. If a human infant is provided with all its nutritional and physical needs, but lacks hugs and cuddles, it will become sick and die. It's called the failure to thrive syndrome. And as it turns out, the infants need their pack just as the wolves do. Now, I personally don't think that it's possible to give a child too many hugs. When my boys were young, part of my bedtime routine with them was to ask each how many hugs they had gotten that day. And this would provoke a serious review of the day, and each would come up with a number of hugs that they had received. And I would remind them that we all need 10 hugs a day to grow. If the hug count was insufficient, I would serve up however many giant hugs were necessary to meet the day's hug quota. And I don't know if insufficient hugs, that is failure to thrive, leads to the broken heart syndrome, but it was important to me that my boys got enough hugs to grow properly, and they did. 2 books of the Bible are unusually difficult to understand. Those 2 books are Daniel and Revelation. These 2 are apocryphal books because they deal with what will happen when the present age comes to an end and God begins the new age, God's kingdom, or the New Jerusalem. Both Daniel and Revelation emerged at a time of great stress within the faith community. Daniel is addressed to faithful Jews, and Revelation is for persecuted Christians. To understand the Old Testament book of Daniel, we have to understand the historical situation in Israel. Alexander's Greek Empire was divided into 3 sections upon his death. Ptolemy took Egypt and Africa. The Seleucids took Persia and East Asia. And Alexander's wife and baby son retreated to Macedonia, the area around Greece and Turkey. At first, the Ptolemies controlled Little Israel, that was right on the boundary between the Ptolemaic Empire and the Seleucid Empire. At first, Ptolemy was in charge, and they were largely ignored Jewish traditions and religion and habits. Anything was going to be okay as long as the taxes were paid. After a time, however, Israel came under the control of the Seleucids, centered in Persia, and the Seleucid branch of the Greek world was more hands-on. They required the Jews to salute the flag, which meant, in that culture, worshiping a statue of the Seleucid king. And this ran counter to everything Jewish. There was much protest and there was much oppression. Now that was Daniel. That was the context in which Daniel was written. The New Testament book of Revelation was written during a period of Roman persecution of Christians, before the rise of Constantine, who superstitiously adopted Christianity and ended the persecutions. The message of these two apocryphal books is the same. In these hard times, keep the faith, baby. Hang in there. God will wipe out the oppressors and reward you in the new age to come. So what did this new age look like? Jesus talks about it a little. All of the bad guys would be eliminated in a final battle between the children of light and the children of darkness. There would be no more suffering. God, in Revelation, will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. Wow. No more broken heart syndrome. No more failure to thrive. No more grief. No more death. It sounds ideal. And that's exactly what it is. It's an ideal picture of life in God's new kingdom. All the bad guys will be eradicated. No more stress, no more sorrow, no more death, no more broken hearts, no more failure to thrive. But ideals are like the stars. We don't move in and settle down on the star. If we tried, we'd be immediately incinerated. But we chart our course by those stars. Our ideals are navigational tools by which we make our way through this life. There have been lots of people over the years who've written bestsellers about when God is going to blow the trumpet and bring about the end of our present age and all of the troubles and struggles that we've been having. A lot of those same people have been wrong about their predictions. Personally, I have not been able to read God's mind to determine what God's going to do and when God's going to do it. I haven't been able to look over God's shoulder to see the calendar that God's working off of. The way I figure it is that there are some things that are God's business and just not my business. So I'm not going to presume to know what only God knows. I'm just a limited human being. I figure it's my job to proceed as best I can through the world in which God has placed me, and to leave the future in God's hands. In the meantime, I try to do the best I can to deal with the fears and the losses that I experience, and to be a good member of our human community. Hopefully I can help others who are struggling to thrive. Maybe I can be a good member of the pack, the fellowship of human beings that I share life with. Now, God bless you. Stay safe. And if you find value here, I'd appreciate it if you'd pass it along. Thank you. See you soon.